If you're a beginner just starting out, chances are you're struggling with chords. But don't worry, you'll get there. All it takes is practice, right? And it certainly helps if you know how to speed up the process a little bit. Well, today I'm going to show you a few quick and easy strategies that you can use to practice your chords that I wish I knew when I was a beginner. Why? You know why? Because you're a guitar player, and this is GuitarAmado. Well, hello again to all my fantastic guitar playing friends out there. Welcome back to the wonderful world of GuitarAmado, where there is no right or wrong way to play, there's just your way. And if you're new to the channel, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Adam Amado, and I'm here to help retrain the way you think about playing the guitar. That way, you can have more fun and get better faster. Now today we are talking about chords, specifically how beginners can simplify the process and turn any chord into an easy chord. So let's start out with what is, in my opinion, the easiest chord on the guitar, E minor. Now I know not everyone would agree with me about this particular chord here. In fact, I'm about to contradict myself here in a second, but the obvious reason that this traditional E minor chord is so easy is the fact that it only uses 2 fingers. And what makes it even better? Which 2 fingers is completely up to you. So like this diagram here is showing us to use fingers 1 and 2. Or you could use fingers 2 and 3. And if you want to get really obscure with it, you could use fingers 3 and 4 as well. But the decision really comes down to context. What chords are coming before or after the E minor chord? So for example, if I'm playing this G major chord and switching to an E minor chord, I would probably use my first and second fingers for the E minor chord. And that is because I don't have to move my first finger at all when I'm coming from this G major chord. So my first finger is an anchor point. And then if I were to move to an A minor chord after the E minor chord, I would probably play the E minor with my second and third fingers. And the reason being is that when we move to the A minor chord, all I'm going to have to do is drop these 2 fingers down, 1 string, and my first finger is already free and ready to be placed to complete this A minor chord. But hey, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just presenting the facts. It's up to you to decide which way works best for you. So anyway, the question of the day is, how could we make this chord any easier? I mean, after all, it only uses 2 fingers, right? Well, we could play this chord with only 1 finger if we only strum from the 4th string down. And that means you now have 4 possible finger choices to experiment with. So we could play it with the first finger, second finger, third finger, or the 4th finger. Kind of awkward there with that one. Now you might be one step ahead of me here, but we can make this chord even easier and play it with no fingers, right? Just play the open first 3 strings. Now obviously the full 6-string version of this chord sounds a lot better. At least it does to me. Remember, you're free to form your own opinions. But the point here is that we are taking steps to simplify this chord down to the easiest possible way to play it. Now, I know this concept might not be extremely useful in the context of this E minor chord here. I mean, after all, the full chord only uses 2 fingers, right? So you might not even have to simplify it at all. But what about this other extremely important beginner guitar chord? Yep, the C major. Every beginner's favorite, right? Now, in my experience, most beginners struggle with this chord. Now, looking at the diagram, it doesn't really look all that hard, but the fact that your fingers are so spread out horizontally makes it very difficult for a lot of beginner guitar players to get it to sound good. And the number one reason being blocked strings. So when our fingers are spread out more like this, we have a tendency to want to flatten them out as well. It's just a little more comfortable, right? But the problem with that is when you flatten your fingers out, they begin to lay across the other strings that they're not supposed to be touching. So as you strum through the chord, you start to hear a lot of those muted, nasty sounding notes. So what can you do if this is in fact a problem for you? Well, the answer can be summed up into just one word: simplify. We can use the exact same strategy that we used for the E minor chord to simplify this C major chord. So for example, if we just look at the first 3 strings, we're taking this rather difficult chord shape and turning it into a nice, easy chord shape that can be played with just one finger. And when you play with just one finger, it makes it much easier to work out the kinks. So let's say this 3-string chord shape sounds like this for you. So this, the 3rd string's open, so that's totally fine. But the 2nd and the 1st string are muted. So first of all, you kind of look at the 2nd string and just say, okay, maybe my placement's a little bit off. I could get a little closer to the fret. Okay, it's still buzzing a little bit, so I'm going to add a little more pressure. So that takes care of the 2nd string, but my 1st string is still muted now. So this is where my 1st finger is kind of laying across the strings here, and it's laying down and touching that 1st string. So this is where you can experiment with being more up on the fingertip, making those adjustments in your wrist, maybe your elbow a little bit, maybe even the shoulder. This is where you have to experiment and figure out what sort of adjustments you have to make in order to make it comfortable for yourself. So once you have this single finger chord all cleaned up and ready to go, turn it into a 2-finger chord and start the process all over. Get that all cleaned up, and then once you're ready to tackle the full chord shape again, it won't seem quite as difficult. And if it does give you problems, you now know exactly what to do. You either work on cleaning up the sound with all 3 fingers, or you go back to one of the simpler chords that you tried before and keep practicing. Just remember, the real test for any chord comes down to how efficient you are when you move to another chord and then come back to it. So for example, let's combine this C major and move to our E minor chord here. Back to the C major. And even in this case, if you're struggling to switch between these 2 chords, you can still simplify the process. So in the context of a 3-string chord shape, the C major chord becomes a 1-finger chord. The E minor becomes a no-finger chord. Then if we do a 4-string chord shape, we have 2 fingers for the C major and 1 finger for the E minor. And then back to the full chord shape for the C major and the full chord shape for the E minor. So there you have it. Next time you find yourself struggling with a particular chord, just remember, there is always an easier way to play it. But I just don't recommend that you use this method as an excuse to avoid the hard stuff. I mean, unless of course you like that sound of the open 3 strings versus the full E minor chord. I mean, if that's the case, who am I to tell you that it's wrong? I don't care what method you choose. I just want you to have more fun playing the guitar. So that's all for today. Be sure to like and share this video if you found it helpful, and hit that subscribe button if you want to tune in to more content like this in the future. Feel free to drop any questions in the comments down below, or if you'd just like to give me an update on how your guitar playing's coming along, I'd love to hear from you. So I will see you next week, and until then, happy practicing, my friends.